The NHL trade deadline is well behind us and playoff races are in full swing. Does anyone want to make the playoffs in the East? And how are the Avs and Preds changing the picture out West? Plus, we've got a full weekend of games to preview and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner from Locked On Flyers. I'm here each and every Friday with Gil Martin of Locked On Islanders. You can find our show over on YouTube. We're on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get the latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. How's it going, Gil?
It's going. It's Friday, and the weather is getting warmer, and the playoffs are getting closer.
They are, but if the action in the NHL last night was indicative of anything, it seems like other than the teams at the very top, nobody seems to want it, right?
Nobody seems to be playing consistently well enough to make a claim, and everybody has a chance because everyone else is losing. So go figure.
Yeah, it is really interesting. Of course, both of our teams, as just mentioned in the intro, did not win last night,
No.
causing problems for both teams. But, the Caps, the Sabres, the Pens, and the Devils all moved up a little bit closer as a result of those losses. The Sabres seem to be making a go of it right now, having won 3 in a row, I believe.
And getting great goaltending along the way right now. Here's a team that started out the season with so many questions in goal. They seem to have figured it out, and they're trying to get back into the playoff hunt before it's too late. It's going to be tight.
It is. Right now, they are sitting at 69 points. Very nice for them. But a couple of the teams above them have games in hand, even though there's like 1 or 2 points separating the teams above them. And then you have at the other end of the spectrum here, the Detroit Red Wings. Like, what is happening there?
7 losses in a row. And, here is a team that 2 weeks ago just looked entrenched in a playoff spot. And now they are on the outside looking in only right now because the Islanders have a game in hand on the Red Wings. It is going down to the wire, but it seems to be a race to the bottom because nobody wants to step up and play consistently well enough to claim the spot.
Right. And, we're getting to the point where, there's like 15 games left, right? 15 to 18 games left for each team. There is not a lot of wiggle room here for these teams to figure it out. And I feel like, a week from now, even we could be talking about a very different playoff picture in the East.
No question. And, Detroit, they don't have a lot of time to right the ship. I mean, you cannot go on a losing streak at this point in the year and then have enough time to recover from it. If they don't straighten themselves out in the next couple of games, they're going to find themselves way behind.
Yeah, but I think one team that has done a good job as of late, even though their last 10 wouldn't suggest it necessarily, but I think the Tampa Bay Lightning, like post trade deadline, have put themselves in a pretty good spot. They've won 2. They're creating a little bit more space between them. Now, partially it's because Detroit is losing, right? But there is a little space there now for their spot in the wild card race. Not likely that they'll catch up with the top 3, but I think they're going to be pretty much a lock in one of those wild card spots.
Yeah, and it's interesting to, if you look back at the approach they took, they went in. They were buyers at the deadline, and it seems to be paying off at this point. And The other thing about Tampa Bay, they are so good at home and they struggle on the road.
Right. I think that has been a part of it. But, they've won 2 in a row now. And, the Islanders, who are in that second wild card spot at the moment, lost to. So, in terms of the Islanders having, maybe that top wild card spot, that's a question mark there, right?
It is. And, back to back, they were shut out in back to back games for the first time in 4 years, coming off a 6-game winning streak and then just coming up absolutely empty in the last 2 games. They now have Ottawa and the Rangers coming up, and those are going to be very big games for the Islanders this weekend.
Yeah, the Flyers don't have it much easier, having just faced the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the next opponents are the Bruins, the Leafs again, the Panthers are in there,
Yeah.
somewhere the Canes are in there. Like, it's just a gauntlet. So, honestly, things could be extremely different, a week to 2 weeks from now in the East and where the wild card spots are and all of that.
Yeah, very well could be. And then you have, other teams that kind of were more sellers at the deadline, and yet they're still kind of hanging around in the wild card race.
Right, you look at the Washington Capitals and
Yeah,
you're like, "Is there something there?" I just
yeah,
like and it's fascinating to me because, the Caps have a -31 goal differential,
yeah.
and yet they're still, like, hovering in this playoff conversation here and just won't give up. I mean, Spencer Carberry has done a remarkable job with dealing with everything that he's had to leading this team behind the bench.
Yeah, no question. He's done a really solid job. And when you have that big of a goal differential, but you're still just on the outside of the playoffs looking in, they're winning 3-2 and then losing 6-1. I mean, what how do you get
Right.
there? I mean, it's a challenge.
It absolutely is, and, I hesitate to mention the New Jersey Devils, but, they are still mathematically in there, even though they're at the bottom of this, chunk of teams, that we've talked about. The Pens are still kinda there too, below the Devils. So, it'll be a absolutely wild finish in the East.
No question. It's going to go down to the wire. And, right now you have like 6 or 7 teams that are still realistically active. You really have 6 teams within 5 points of each other going for that last wild card spot right now. And third place in each division isn't that far ahead. So it's wide open.
Absolutely. Before we talk about the Western Conference in the next segment, just want to touch on something that's interesting related to how everything finishes out in these playoffs. Because you talk about like selling or buying and going for it this year at the trade deadline, as we did last Friday in our trade deadline wrap up show. You look at the implications for the draft and you look at the top 5 teams in the league right now as it currently stands, which is Florida, Vancouver, the Rangers, Winnipeg, and Boston. 4 of those 5 teams have traded away their first round pick. So if you look at the bottom of the current, if the lottery or if the draft were held today, here's who would be picking. Those last 5 picks in the first round, the Rangers are the only one that have their pick left.
Wow. Wow. The teams that are going for it are really going for it, and they may be sacrificing the future to get there.
Yeah, and, I think that you have, teams, that are at the bottom right now that have a couple of those picks, but then you have like, Calgary has Vancouver's pick, the
Yeah.
Flyers have Florida's pick. So I think that they're teams that are kind of, in the middle of a rebuild process, with some additional first round picks this year. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, no doubt. And those teams in the middle, depending on how they pick, that could help them get from the middle to the top, but it'll take a couple of years because, as we know, 90 something percent of NHL, even first round picks, do not make an immediate impact in the year that they are drafted.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we will talk about the West coming up next. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, there's no cap on a 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for the legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker dealer. All right, out west. Before we dig into the playoff race and kind of how Nashville and the Avs could be changing the picture a little bit here, um, we had a little bit of news in the Arizona arena saga come out yesterday, where they had the official hearing to declare that the piece of land in the North Phoenix area that they're looking at can indeed be sold. So that was approved. Now, after that, you're looking at a 10-week advertisement period that has to take place before the auction can take place. If you look at it, that puts us about May 23rd. So it looks like the auction at its earliest would happen the week after Memorial Day weekend, which is we're cutting things close now in
Yeah.
terms of dealing with implications for next season. We know the players union is irate about how long the Mullet Arena situation is taking place. And, we had this week Atlanta come up with another potential expansion process, which then kind of reignited the conversation about Salt Lake City's bid. And, would that be a relocation home for the Arizona Coyotes? Um, I just feel like the time is too tight to
It,
have
it's
anything in place.
it's very tight, and it may mean an extra season at Mullet. And I don't blame the Players Association for being upset because the lower attendance at Mullet Arena means less revenue and less money toward the salary of NHL players. And the longer it goes on, the more of a drag it is on the overall cap number.
Yeah, I think that's, the biggest problem here. And it's also the facilities issue for them. Like,
Yeah.
if you say, okay, we're doing this for 2 years to get a stadium built, okay, you can maybe live with that. But it's gonna maybe extend 3, 4 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot to ask.
It is because how quickly, let's say they even get the approval, June 1st, and I'm just throwing that date out because it's a round date. How long after you get that approval, and then you have to get the environmental approvals and all the other things that have to take place? How long does it take you to actually get a shovel in the ground? And then how long does it take to build the arena and get it ready for an actual game?
And the infrastructure around it and
Right.
roads and like there's so much to this. And if they think they can, get this done by the time this Mullet Arena deal expires, I just don't see it happening. But they seem to think they can do it, and we know the league is invested in keeping the team in Arizona. So to be continued. In the in the meantime, you look at the standings right now, and it's really interesting out west because you're looking at a couple of teams you're looking at a couple of teams with really big winning streaks recently. So you have the Colorado Avalanche, which have now jumped into first place in the Central Division, and the Dallas Stars, just below them, lost 2 games. The Avs have won 5 in a row, 7-2-1 in their last 10. Are they making a case for themselves here to be the top team in the Central?
They're certainly going for it. And, they're tied in points, but Dallas has played one extra game. You get the feeling between Colorado, Dallas, and Winnipeg, you have 3 teams separated by 2 points. That's going down to the wire.
Absolutely. And I think that, you look at the difference in the division and the seedings and all of that. They're not too far behind the Canucks either,
No?
and could conceivably end up the top team in the West, which would be very fascinating to see, especially because of who could wind up being at the bottom of that, which is the Nashville Predators. Just because of the division matchups in the first round, it would be Nashville at that point. But Nashville and Vegas are sitting in the 2 wild card spots at the moment, and Nashville 8-0-2 in their last 10, and they're sitting real pretty in that wild card spot.
They are, and they've been playing some really good hockey as of late. And, you know, here's a team, ironically enough, they are much better on the road than they are at home. So it's almost like the home ice disadvantage for Nashville. They are road warriors. I think they keep their game more simple and straightforward when they're away from home. But here's a team that really is making a nice late run. And Barry Trotz, as the GM for the first year here, he seems to be a year ahead of schedule as to where most people thought Nashville would be. They chose not to trade away their goaltender at the trade deadline, and right now it's paying off.
Yeah, and Vegas, who's sitting below them right now, has a pretty manageable schedule. I mean, they do face the Lightning in the next several games, but other than that, they're playing the Devils, the Kraken, the Blue Jackets, the Blues. But the Golden Knights are facing the Predators on March 26th, and
Hmm.
that that is a game I'm going to be looking ahead to.
That will be a fun game to watch, and both teams will definitely need the points, so that'll be intense.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, with Dallas losing a couple of games, they're still in very good shape, but they're tied in points. But because of the you know, way the points work out, they're in second place in the Central right now. And then Winnipeg is only 2 points behind them, but with 3 games in hand. So bloodbath is the word that is coming to mind for this Central Division, and then who winds up in the wild card spot here.
Yeah, and you look at the race for the wild card, and in the West, it's a little more spread out than it is in the East. But Minnesota is only 4 points behind Vegas. St. Louis 6 points behind Vegas. They're not dead yet.
No, and they've won their last 3 and are looking pretty solid. So it's anybody's race here, and I just I feel like the teams that are at the top in the East, I feel like are stronger, but I feel like there's more parity in the West now.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And there's so little space separating the top teams in the West. And don't count Edmonton completely out. They're only 4 points behind Winnipeg, in the overall standings. This is going to be a fun finish. And I don't know if we'll know the matchups in the West until the very last day of the regular season because the teams are that close.
Yeah, I'm still, obviously, because I have to do this, throwback to the beginning of the season where I said the Nashville Predators were going to be the potential surprise pick coming out of the West, and I'm very proud of that pick. But to be determined if they actually make it. But I have good good hopes for them moving forward. But yeah, so we have a full weekend of games coming up this weekend to talk about, and we will do that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Grocery bills are so expensive these days, but now they don't have to be. Start getting cash back on your grocery shopping with the free Ibotta app and get cash back every time you shop. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user saves $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. So you can buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you've been dying to go to, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you add your offers in the app, upload your receipt, and you get real cash that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Right now, Ibotta is offering listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code Locked On NHL when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use code Locked On NHL. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code Locked On NHL.
So the weekend ahead. Now, there's only 2 games on the schedule for tonight. I'm like, were they trying to beware the Ides of March or something and keep the schedule light tonight? But we have the Ducks in Winnipeg, and then the Kings facing the Blackhawks. And the matchups themselves aren't as enticing, except for the fact that both the Jets and the Kings need to continue to rack up these points in that aforementioned Western playoff race.
Yeah, both these teams need to keep winning. And, look, nobody's going to win all the rest of their games, but these are games you can't afford to lose. When you're facing struggling teams like the Ducks and like the Blackhawks, you've got to take advantage. And Winnipeg and LA, they need to win these games. You got to win the games you're supposed to win. And that's what these games are for those teams.
Absolutely. Then we have 14 games on Saturday to make up for it. Starting off with a very intriguing matchup in the afternoon, the Sabres visiting Detroit. And we just talked about the Sabres, right? That they're kind of on a hot streak. Detroit needs to get it together, like unstoppable force, immovable object. What's
Yeah.
going here?
Yeah, this is a huge. The Red Wings have to break this slump before they fall so far
Yeah.
behind. And Buffalo is looking better and better. You and I both know this game is going to overtime or a shootout, and I'm just going to leave it at that. So,
Right, that the 3-point devil
yes,
of a game there. Yeah, your Islanders are facing the Senators in an effort to get those playoff points. Can they do it?
they have to. They're back home after a 4-game road trip. They face the Rangers later on in the weekend, so gotta beat Ottawa if you're going to have a chance.
Absolutely. The 2 other teams in the East that are trying to claw their way up, the Pittsburgh Penguins and the New Jersey Devils. The Penguins are facing the Rangers on Saturday. The Devils, though, are in Arizona, so maybe they will have a better chance, but both of those teams need to rack up the points.
They do, and the Coyotes have been playing a little better as of late. They seem to run hot and cold, but they're coming out of that cold slump that they were in a couple of weeks ago. The Devils, they changed their goaltending, so that's what they needed the most. Let's see if they can start a hot streak after trade deadline.
The Battle of Florida is also taking place on Saturday with the Lightning facing the Panthers. And with the Panthers like sitting atop the league, you got to think Tampa, who's trying to assert themselves right now, again, as we talked about, would want to take them down.
Yeah, this is a great rivalry. The battle for Florida. Always enjoy watching these two teams. And now, when they're both good and both in in the thick of the playoff hunt, it adds a little extra juice to it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The Flyers are going to be in Boston Saturday night. That is always a tough assignment for anybody, but for the way the Flyers have struggled a little bit defensively, I would say, and goaltender Sam Ersson has gotten to be pulled twice recently. And so I think this is going to be a really, really tough game for the Flyers. Huge implications again for that Eastern playoff race.
No doubt. And Boston needs the points. They're battling Florida for first place in the division. So should be an intense matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. The other game that should be interesting earlier in the evening is the Kings and Stars.
Yeah, yeah. Kings will be on a back-to-back, and the Stars, as we mentioned, right in the thick of the battle for a playoff spot and for first place. So I like this matchup. Tough road game for the LA Kings.
Right. The other game that I would want to watch in the late games is the Colorado Avalanche visiting the Edmonton Oilers. Like the Oilers want to move up a little bit. The Avs are trying to keep that top spot in the Central that we talked about. This should be a real good one.
Yeah, and it's in Edmonton, which I think makes it even better. Colorado has this winning streak that it'll be on the line. That is going to be a very entertaining and skilled hockey game.
Yeah, and the other game I'm going to put on the second screen is the Preds at the Kraken because I want to see if the Preds can continue, moving up in the world.
Yeah, and I've just enjoyed watching this team exceed expectations all year.
Absolutely. So Sunday, St. Patrick's Day. I feel like it's only appropriate that the Islanders are playing the Rangers on St. Patrick's Day. I don't know why. It just feels right to me.
Well, look, anytime these two teams get together, it's a great rivalry. And obviously, the Rangers are trying to hold on to first place. Carolina is right behind them. The Islanders, as we mentioned, battling for playoff berths. Both teams on a back-to-back. This is going to be an intense matchup. National TV on TNT at Madison Square Garden.
I weep for the people in the surrounding neighborhood of Madison Square Garden. It could get a little ugly there. Meanwhile, the Devils are continuing that road trip, visiting the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah, and again, you have two teams that need the points, and Vegas they are trying to find themselves. They made a lot of aggressive moves at the trade deadline. How long will it take for those new players to gel with this roster? Will it be in time for this team to really get hot late in the season and into the playoffs?
Yeah, I think so. And then you look at the other couple of matchups. I think, the Red Wings, it'll determine what happens the day before, right?
Yeah.
They're facing the Pittsburgh Penguins, both teams on a back to back, both with huge implications. But this is another one to keep an eye on.
Absolutely, and the Penguins have the Rangers and the Red Wings. You're fighting with the teams over this weekend that are either in the playoffs or you're battling for that playoff spot with. This is a critical game for both teams.
Absolutely. All right, that will do it for today's show. Gil will be back on Monday talking to hosts from around the Locked On NHL network about any top stories that may or may not occur this weekend and check in with those teams. And we will be back next Friday to cover the week that was next week as well. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league, including this very show. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe. Have a great weekend, everybody.